I'm Gwen from the 510 Art Lab, and we are here doing the Learn to Lap Loom online class. It's our quarantine version of the 510. We never thought we'd do it this way, so it's something new. If anybody has any suggestions of other classes or different ways we could do it, we'd be more than happy to give it a try. So welcome to Learning the Lap Loom. So in the kit today came 3 balls of yarn, a small ball of cotton yarn, a tapestry or a yarn needle, a baggie of pegs, and a little piece of cardboard. Now before we start, it would be a good idea if you could grab yourself a pencil, just a regular fork from your drawer, anything will work, a little scissors, and a tape measure. And then if you'd also like some pen and paper to just take some notes. The registration kit also came with a handmade lap loom. Mike Borgman made these lap looms for us, so it's good, sturdy work, nice workmanship. So these are yours. Now we're going to today be making coasters with them about this 5x5 size, but a loom like this, we can use all the pegs and use it for placemats. You could use it for small wall hangings. You could turn it this way to use it for wall hangings. You could use it for little squares that you would sew together to make something. So it has a lot of other great things to use it for other than just the coasters that we're going to do today. But if you would decide that this is not for you and you don't really have a use for it later, we can use these again at the lab. So we would refund you $15 if you want to return it by June 15th. Otherwise, we'd love for you to keep it and create lots of great things. Okay, the coasters that we're going to do are going to be 5x5. And there's a whole bunch of varieties of ways that you can make it. You just make up your own design. But let's just start with a 5x5. The first thing we're going to do is warp the loom. Now the small ball of cotton yarn that you got is a great yarn. Cotton yarn is a great thing to use for the actual warping because it's sturdier and denser. So I usually start most of my weavings with the cotton loom. Now because it's 5x5, we're going to take a tape measure and roughly take the middle, which I've kind of marked already on my loom, and take one of the pegs and mark the middle. And then we want to do 5 inches, so about 2.5 inches on each side. So 1, 2 here. And just double check that's about 5 inches. It is. And then on this loom in particular, I like to go every other peg, put a peg in every other hole. Now it just depends on the loom that you have or if you want them really thin, tightly put together, then you could do them closer. But for this project, I think we should do every other hole. So put 1 peg in every other hole. And then we are going to go and do the same thing on the bottom. I've already marked, because this is a loom that I use, the middle. And I will do 2.5 inches on this side and 2.5 inches on this side. And just double check that yes, that's 5. And also the other thing you'd want to double check is that you have the same amount of peg holes on each side so that when we go this way that you are all even. You're going to want to put these every other one. Now your kit came with some extra pegs, so if you ever want to make something bigger, a dishcloth, or you just want to make a big square or maybe a whole placemat, then there are extra pegs for that. But for today, this is what we're going to use. Then the other spot, I just make myself a guideline, is the sides. You don't really use those, but as for a guide. So I marked about the middle, and there is 2, 3, 4, 5. So in between here is 5 inches, and they're evenly spaced. So now what we will do is start warping the loom. And the warp threads, there's a warp thread and there's a weft thread. And the warp threads are the ones that go up and down, and they are your base. And that's what you use the different colors to weave through. So like I said, this can be any color really that you want. I like to match it with the things because sometimes you use the fringe, or sometimes you purposely want to see the warp string in your design. But any color usually though. And what you do is just make a little knot on the first one, and we just go over this peg, then you come down and you go over this, around this peg, back up, and you just go around each peg. Now you want to keep it as tight as you can. You don't want it so tight that you pull it and it's going to break, but you want it a pretty decent tension. So for each one, I just kind of hold it and guide it along. And at the very end, we can also always make it tighter if we need to. And again, all we're doing is going around each peg. And when I get to this one, I'm going to leave a healthy tail so that I can make a decent knot. Pull it tight again and just make sure it just bounces back a little bit. You just want to make sure it bounces back. And we're going to take it and just make a double knot around this to keep the tension. Oh, that looks pretty good. Make sure all the pegs are in. And again, this is called your warp thread. Okay, now the next step is just to sketch out your design. And again, I'll just put a few here for you to see. You could do 3 colors. You could do the 3 colors in different rows. You can do 3 rows, 5 rows. You can do whatever you want. So I think the one that I'm going to do, I'm just going to sketch it out. I just did a quick little square here. This isn't much art. And just, I want to do a yellow, a green, a yellow, and a pink stripe. Now, if it's going to be about 5 by 5, each stripe is going to be 1 1/4 inch. So just, it's good just to sketch it out so you know when you're doing it, how far and how much to measure. So my first one is going to be yellow. So I'm going to take the yellow and I'm just going to do about 6 or 8 lengths like this. 3, 4, 5. This is also not science, just whatever you feel comfortable with. Then take the tapestry needle. Now this needle is either called a tapestry needle or a yarn needle. And there are also some tapestry needles that have a hook up on the side for using it, but these are the ones during quarantine that we can find, first of all. And second of all, they're just an inexpensive, easy way to do it. And if you ever want to buy more, you can get them pretty much anywhere, and they just come in a 2-pack. So, and there's also different sizes. Here's another smaller size, depending on what you like to work with. But I just tried to use the bigger size so that it's easy to see and easy to work with. So now you just thread this needle, very simple. Pull it. Now at the very beginning, it gets a little bit crazy and there's lots of yarn. So just kind of do what makes you feel comfortable. And we are going to learn the tabby weave. There's lots of different kinds of weaves that you can do. You can do over one and skip two. You can do all kinds of different fancy things, but we're going to learn the basic tabby weave. And what you do is you just start with your needle that's threaded, and you go over one piece of the warp and over and under and over and under and over. It's just a simple over, under, over, under. Pull it through. Continue. Just an over, under pattern. And you pull it all the way through. And now the two pegs that I have on the side, those are our guide for where the bottom is going to be. And again, leave a good extra tail, and that's just kind of a guide to where it's going to be. Then if you want to, I take this piece of cardboard that also came in your kit and follow that over under pattern, and then you'll have just a little bit sturdier of a guide on the bottom. And all this will make a little bit more sense once we keep going through the instructions. So then I'm just gonna even it up, and that's just a little guide, and every once in a while I can just kind of do that to make sure. So I'll leave a tail about that far. Now you're going to take the needle, and we went under this last one, so on the way back we're gonna go over. So over this one, under, over, under, over, under. So again, just the same. And you're going to pull it through. And now this is the part that will take a little bit of practice, is the edges. So what you're going to do is you're going to make an arch. And when you first start, what you want to do is leave about a needle's worth of edging there. Pull this. Then you want to guide this down and then make a couple other arches. Then you take your fork and you start from the middle and you just lightly press down, maybe holding the cardboard at first. And you start from the middle and go out. And then go back in the middle and go on this side. Now, the reason you want to leave a little bit here is as you go, if this gets too tight, you will see your weaving starting to go in. And then your coasters, like here's one, for example, that I did that you can see kind of comes in like this, where you want a nice straight line. And so that's the hardest part, I think, of doing these, is keeping these sides as straight as you can. Now the next part I'm going to show you is we're just using a pencil. But you can, when you buy big fancy kits, they will give you something called a shed stick. And what you do with that is you start on this side, and now the very first one we went under. So now we're going to do under, over, under, over, under, over. And what this does is make a little shed here, a little extra room underneath, so that you don't have to always go through, and it just makes it go a little bit faster. Now, if you decide that that gets in your way or you don't want to use it, you don't need to, but we're using a pencil and it's as a shed stick. It's called a shed stick. Then on this way, all you have to do is take your needle and just follow through the little opening that it made for you. Pull it through. And again, now you want to lightly hold this, leave a little bit of loop there, make an arch, kind of guide this one down, and then make another arch. Take your fork and go from the middle to the outside. And the other reason you do the middle to the outside is then it won't pull, because you're pushing the strings out instead of pulling them in. Now I'm just going to make sure that this cardboard's still here and I'm still on the right thing. Now when you first start, it's a little bubbly, but once we get going, this will be a sturdier pattern toward the bottom. So now this last one you see goes under, and we're going to want to go over, so we're going to move this all the way up so we have as little of a shed as possible. And now we're going to go over this one, under, over, under. And this again is just called a tabby weave. And you want to pull through. Being careful not to pull too tight. Hold a little bit. Bring that down. Make a couple of arcs in your rainbow and go from the middle to the outside. Middle to the outside. Bring that down and make it nice and tight. Now we can pull the shed back down so we can really see where that opening is, and just put this straight through the opening. Pull it through. Do the same thing. So we just want to continue like this until we have 1 1/4 inch of the yellow. So I'm just going to go back and forth a few times to show you. Got a little bit of a knot there. Now, one other thing about weaving is it's very methodical, and it's not something that you can rush. You need to just be patient with it, and when you do it, you can kind of get into like a method, and you get a little rhythm going, and it can just be very, like I said, meditative, but it's just nothing that you want to rush. Now you'll start to see as you get a few more rows here, let's just double check to make sure that this will start to get a little bit sturdier, and so you can push down a little bit better on that, holding it. So now let's just go over and under, back and forth a few times until we have about 1/4 inch, 1 1/4 inch. Okay, so now we're just continuing on. We went under this one, now we're going to go over, under, and we are just about there. And you may be getting close to the end of your color. Just hold that a little bit. Now you always want to make your arch, you want it to make it an arch. You don't really want to pull it, again, too tight. Now we're going to measure, we're getting really close here to about 1.25 inches, maybe 1 or 2 more rows. Let me quick do that. This will be a good opportunity for you to watch again the over under. One more row. That will be about 1.25 inches. Now to tie them off or to change color, we don't want to do it right at the end, so we want to go in just a little bit. So you continue on your pattern. So now I went under, so I go over, and I'm just going to go in like 4 or 5 until it gets to the bottom. And we're going to pull it through the bottom. And we'll take that out, take the needle out, push this in with your fork. Make sure you have a nice tail. I mean, I have 3 or 4 inches, and you'll want that much at least at the very end. So now just leave that hang out for a while. And now we're going to go to green, and we want to do 1.25 inches of the green. So we're going to do the same thing as we did with the yellow. Just pull out 6 or 8 lengths. And it's really easy to change colors, so that's why you just want to take as much as you can. Now, the more times you change color, the more, once we're done in the back, you have to fix the back. But it's not really as hard as some other, when you crochet or you knit or you do some other things and you have to change color. This is pretty easy. So now what you want to do is you want to just start from where you finished, from where you stopped, and just continue the color. So we went underneath this one right here. So we're gonna be going under. We're gonna come up. And if we were going to continue that yellow, the yellow would come up right here. Pull it all the way through. Again, leave a nice healthy tail. And now you just continue going over, under, over, under, over, under. Hold this a little bit so it doesn't pull too tight. Use your fork to get the down tight. And now we're going to continue this way with the green, same as before, through the shed. Make an arch. Have a little bit of room right here. Hold it down, make a couple of small arches. And now you should start to be able to tell that this is getting thicker and that you can push on here and it's not sliding around. Then you can also go down here and just pull these two tails a little bit so that they're nice and tight and get that. And now as you've been going, you can also see how the white is not even showing in here. The only time now that this white is going to show is if we keep the tails on like this at the end. That's the only time it's going to show. If you do that tight enough and you use your fork and you push it down and make it tight and even, you won't even see the color warp strings. So that's why I said you can, if you don't care about this, or you know, you're maybe not going to have a fringe, it doesn't really matter. What matters the most about the warp is that it's sturdy. Now if you had a regular yarn like this and you use that as your warp, this frays and it breaks easier where the cotton doesn't. So that's the most important thing. So now we're going to go back and we're going to continue on with the tabby weave, going over and under. The other thing I was going to mention is if you decide you don't like this, you can just take it out. If it's just too much and this isn't room enough for you to use it, you just take it out. And we went under here, so you go over, under, over, under. Now you might also see on mine, and maybe on yours, every time I do a weaving, whether it's a wall hanging or some of these coasters, it seems that my right side, it tends to be more even. All of these are about the same. Here, I always start a little big and it looks a little bit wonky, and it may be because I'm right-handed or I just am still learning, and it starts to even out. But if you have a little bit of bump on the side, don't worry about that. Well, that'll all even out in the end, and it's all part of the practice. So now we took the shed out because, oh, I just didn't like that. I don't have enough room. I don't want to worry about that. Well, you don't need to use it. You just go around the other now and go back the other way. We went over this last one, so now we're going to come under, and you just do the same thing. So the shed stick, or the pencil that we're using now, really is just for ease, to make it go a little quicker. Some people like to use it, some people don't. The other thing to remember is if you do use it and you decide you need to take a break, or you're going to leave and go do something, you want to take it out, because if you leave this in here and you leave for a few hours, it will stretch all of these strings. And so then when you get back, all these strings will not be the same tension. So every time you leave your project, you want to take that out, especially for a long length of time. If you're just leaving for a few minutes, it's not a big deal. But if you're done for the night, then take it out. And so now we will just go ahead and continue the same tabby weave over and under like we did with this next color until we have another 1.25 inches.